What is good, ambush, and welcome to another episode of the Desert Tiger Podcast with me, your host here on the DTP, the Colton G, and this week on Desert Tiger, I am joined by Daz Tha Punk. We're going to give you a little bit of a brief introduction into who Daz is right away here. But first, there's a few things we're going to take care of. So first off, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Secondly, I just want to remind you that I Love DTP is the best place where you can go ahead and support the podcast, because it's where you go and deck yourself out with the latest and greatest Desert Tiger podcast swag, including some sweet hats and toques that you can go and see up on that store right away. I believe they're going to be up there next week, and we're going to have some other things rolling out throughout the spring too, so keep your eyes open on that space. Today's episode is also brought to you by the best app for those of you who are into combat sports, whether it's pro wrestling, whether it's MMA, whether it is boxing. That's right, you guys know I'm talking about Fight TV. You can find it in your app store and find the hardest hitting action today with free shows and pay-per-views as well. We're also brought to you today by Audible. Audible has the largest selection of audio programs available, and they are giving you, the audience of Desert Tiger, a free audiobook with a 30-day trial subscription over at audibletrial.com/Desert Tiger. All right, Ambush. Why don't we talk a little bit about Daz Tha Punk now? Originally starting out in the small town DIY punk and metal scenes, Daz Tha Punk would first earn his chops as a drummer, both recording and touring with various acts, such as Necroholocaust. About 2 years ago, Daz would decide to take a break from this scene and some of the situations it had led him to. Shifting his priorities and cleaning himself up in the process, this decision would lead to him rediscovering a love of hip-hop music, which in turn led to him using poetry as a method of healing and release. A conversation with a friend would eventually take Daz into the studio to fully explore this new realm, and the result? A 6-song EP which he released in 2019. Since that release, Daz has continued to strive to create music for those true underdogs and those who don't just accept the world as it is presented to them. Today, Daz Tha Punk joins me to talk all about that process of cleaning up and finding hip-hop music again. We talk a little bit about that 6-song EP, and we also discuss what Daz has coming up in the future. Spoiler alert, it is three different EPs that he plans on releasing in 2020, and we're going to dive into details about every single one of them. So I hope that you guys are ready, because I'm about to spin one of those tracks off that 6-song EP to kick this bad boy off, and this is One for the Underdog.
I write rhymes for the underdog, for rejects and defects, punished by God, the drugged up and addicted in the chill in the fog, and for the convict sentence to be executed at dawn. I write it for the crack addicted kids on the strip, for the beaten down broken backs and stiff upper lips. I write it for the missing and the murdered on the highway of tears, and the victims of rape who still live in fear. I write it for the children who are sold into slavery, and I write it for the motherfucking pain of the family. I write about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. And this one's for the underdog, and the underdog is you. I write write these rhymes for the ones that never had a hope in hell, and the ones who are tore down and locked in a cell. I write rhymes for the hated and the unforgiven, and the suicidal mothers who forfeit living. I write them for the dealers and the fiends alike, for the slimies and the crimies with the platinum and ice, for the hoods and the thugs that only come out at night, and for the itchy trigger fingers that never thought twice. I write them for the gamblers on the corner rolling dice. I write them for the ones who walk the edge of the knife. I write about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality, cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. And this one's for the underdog, and the underdog is you. Mentally ill, for the junkies who relapse cause they weak and they will, for the victims of genocide unjustly killed, and the ones who are hollow that are seeking their thrills. I write them for the wrongfully accused serving time, even though they never did commit the crime. And I write these rhymes for those who grew old, only to be flushed out into the cold. I write them cause the world is a fucked up place, just being a human can be a fucking disgrace. I rhyme about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. And this one's for the underdog, motherfucker, and the underdog is you. I rhyme about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. I rhyme about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. I rhyme about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. I write it just cause that's what I was sent to do. I rhyme about reality, so fuck all the hype. I write about reality cause that's fucking life. I write all this shit because I'm trying to break through. And this one's for the underdog, and the underdog's you.
The Desert Tiger Podcast.
We are here with Daz the Punk. And Daz grew up a little bit of the punk, the metalhead mindset, much like myself, but now he's embracing an entirely different world, an entirely different way of expression. It's still in the musical realm, but it's definitely a lot different while still embracing his roots, and we're going to get all into that today. So I want to thank my guest today, Daz the Punk, for joining me here on the Desert Tiger Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
I'm super excited to get into this conversation today. You sound like you're incredibly inspired with the work that you're doing right now, and
I am.
It sounds like you really have a good message.
Yeah, I've got a multitude of different sort of faces I'm showing through this. It's really diverse. You know, it allows me to have total and utter creative freedom because, you know, I'm on my own for the most part. All my ideas and concepts and things come from me. I don't have to, you know, wait for anybody else to think of an idea to make something happen. And I have other people I work with, producers and engineer guys that help me put everything together, which I'm extremely grateful for because obviously I wouldn't have anything at all if it wasn't for those people.
Absolutely.
You know, but for the most part, it's like different styles and like, you know, hip hop nowadays, from what I gather is, you know, what I'm seeing is it's very diverse. You've got so many different layers to it, so many different styles, and it's basically like a huge melting pot. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one minute I find I'm doing something that's, you know, like an old school Dre vibe. And then the next minute I find I'm doing something that's trap with, you know, totally different style of rhyming and lyrics, or more poetic, or more different, deeper meanings. And it's just kind of a total creative freedom. And I'm jumping back and forth from basically 3 different EPs that are you know, like totally different styles. Each one of them is a completely different monster, you know? So yeah, I'm really excited about all that.
Okay, cool. So you've got quite a few different directions you're going, which is cool. Like you said, with the melting pot, I find that a lot of artists are slowly less holding themselves to the binds of genre and like style, and more so embracing various different things. And you even see it in like a lot of artists in Canada who like started early, like Maestro Fresh West, where like his last album like started to incorporate a lot of trap vibes, which a lot of people weren't really sure he would even like be able to cover. But even he himself like began like to go into this melting pot, and he himself was more of the boom bap style. He was a lot more of the other things,
The old
and,
school style.
and then like, but when you start mixing it up with the other kids and seeing what they're doing, and it's just like he's just started to get inspired.
I'm so new to hip hop world. You know, what I know is from when I was a kid. That's how what I knew of what rap or hip hop was when I was, you know, a little skater punk kid, you know, I listened to everything. I listened, you know, I was like, when I was younger, it was Wu-Tang, Cypress Hill, and, you know, just some of the basic, you know, like some Onyx and stuff like that. And it's like 90s stuff, right? Because, you know, that was when I started actually really diving into music. But I was also listening to, you know, other stuff as well, like lots of heavy stuff and some punk stuff and like alternative things. And I just liked music in general. It was kind of part of more of a skate culture, you know. I loved the like the aesthetic of you know, graffiti and like, you know, sort of rundown buildings, and that, you know, where people make their home, but it's like there's still something going on there, you know, and like that's kind of culture I like. I don't really like anything that's super sterile and like orderly, and I like stuff with character. And so all of that stuff like kind of resonated with me, like all those different genres. So it's not really a big surprise that I was open to getting into hip hop. It was a really extreme shift from going from where I was right before, you know, doing crust punk and grindcore and like, you know, metal and like extreme metal, blast beating, kind of like crazy stuff. But I think what happened was like, you know, trying to change my life around, looking for something new. Hip hop kind of presented itself to me. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't say, hey, well, I think I'll just do this now. Like, it was kind of like a very slow, gradual process. You know, I had no music with me when I came back here. I had nothing. I left everything I owned. And a roommate I was living with kind of lent me an iPod that had a bunch of music on it. And it had, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't really at the time, because coming from where I was, and I was like, oh, I don't know any of these bands. I don't like it, really, a lot of the stuff that's on here, because it wasn't in my head. I was thinking, oh, this isn't me. This isn't what I'm about, right? But there was music, so I was just listening to this music. And there was one album on there. It was a Prodigy's Fat of the Land. That's like an album that was out when I was in high school. And I was like, oh, I know this. You know, I was like working for this company, you know, construction company. I was listening to this album, and there's this track on it called Diesel Power. It's got this dude rapping on it, and it actually turned out later, I found out, to be Kool Keith.
Okay.
Right. Which now, after listening to Dr. Octagon and like, you know, a lot of the Kool Keith stuff, like it's like it doesn't surprise me now that I go back and listen to that song, because that to me is like kind of opened the door for me a little bit. And it was like, yeah, I think what I like about this track is it's kind of got like this heavy drum and bass thing to it, and it's got like this rapping over it. It sounds fucking wicked. And on the iPod, there was a bunch of other stuff that was familiar. The names were familiar to be like hip hop. So I'm like, well, I started listening to that, you know, and this is like, you know, the basics, J5, Tribe Called Quest, Biggie Smalls, and stuff like that, you know. So I started kind of venturing into that other territory. And then I was always writing lyrics since I was a kid. So I just I was like, well, I bet I could try it out and see what happens, right? So I just started writing, and I wrote for a few months, and I just would write these pages and pages of these rhymes and pages and pages and pages. And it's funny because like a few of my friends and roommates, so like I would read them these rhymes, and they were kind of like, oh, cool, man, you know, cool. And I was just like, I could never really do this. This is just like, what a fucking pipe dream, you know? Like, it wasn't even a dream at the time. It was just kind of like I was just writing. And this one day I was writing, I ran into a friend, he asked me if I wanted to record. He asked me to read it to him, so I read it to him. This is Lex Plexus.
Okay.
Right? And he's the guy who I worked with on the first EP, him and Brent the Butcher, right? And like we spent what turned into, what started out as one song, the first song, which was No Rhyme, No Reason. That was the first song I ever recorded and really, really ever wrote. That started us on a 6-month adventure making that EP. And every time we'd be like, oh, this isn't good enough. We need to like go in there and refine this. And Lex Plexus is really good with that. Like he's got this way of diving into every single sound and everything that happens on that whole EP happens in like a specific order so that you're hearing these things. And then he's got lots of stuff going on with the mastering technique, like and then there's lots of, auto panning on certain tracks where it's like if you're listening to it on headphones, it's like spacing you out all over the place, right? Like that. But so that was how this whole thing kind of got off the ground. And after that, I met through a bit of hanging out with a couple new people and local rapper guys like Otis Davis or Gray Baker and stuff. I met Ethan Keeley.
Okay. And
Ethan Keeley is like a fantastic beat producer. Mm-hmm. He's making all the stuff for a lot of the guys that I know, and it's just he's great at it. And so that's where the new EP is coming from. Is from Ethan Keeley. He's producing all the beats.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he recently did the track for your latest video, Father, right?
Yeah, that's the first single off of the new EP.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and there'll be, right now I've got like 5 songs for it, 3 of which are recorded. And then there's still, 2 of them that are forming their lyrical patterns and got to still nail down all the parts and make sure everything's exactly how I want. And then I think we might try to get one more in there, but yeah.
Okay, cool. So before we jump into exactly that, you mentioned that you had the lyrics before, or some of the lyrics at least, before you started doing the beats. So you had the lyrics before No Rhyme, No Reason, before you had the beats to it?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're reading it out to him, do you already have an idea of the cadence that you want the song to go into? Because like when I write a song like without a beat, sometimes I already have an idea of the way that I want to do it. So did you already give him the idea of like the way that you wanted the song to flow? Or did you have to adapt the flow of the song based on how things were built?
Well, for the most part, everything was already laid out. And No Rhyme, No Reason actually was like, I was writing these little snippets. And it was bars mostly, there was no actual real topic that anything was on. So finally I was like, hey, and I've got enough stuff here to try to compile into this big song. Because my whole thing was like once I wrote so much, I would just try to go, okay, this kind of conceptually works with this line and this connects with this. And then I would take certain lines out and just to make it so that it fit in my head, because I have a good timing. I'm a drummer.
Yeah.
So like being able to like read the lyrics and know when changes where it was, mostly simple, like, 16 bars. I didn't even call it then at the time. I didn't even call it that. I just was like, I could just feel where it was supposed to change into a chorus or a hook.
It just came naturally.
Yeah. So basically I, went to his house and like the whole thing with the first EP is that we literally like, because I didn't know anything about rap. We're just like these 2 dudes in a basement who'd never done rap before.
So did you know what like an 808 was?
No, I didn't know anything.
Wow.
All I knew was that what I kind of had a vision in my head of how things should sound, or even like how the way that how I thought it should sound should create visual and imagination and stuff. And I had this thing in my mind that controlled every single song, So we wrote and made all of those beats from scratch, like between Lex Plexus and me doing all that. It was all from scratch. And I think that makes it super special because, it's everything on it. It's a living piece of art. And it's like we didn't use beat programs. Like we used natural instruments. There's slide guitar on it. There's, different programs. We did manual beats. I actually played the drums on like one of the songs. Lex Plexus actually played a drum part on one of the songs, and we just put this thing together, and it's got so many elements at play in it, right? Like 6 months for 6 tracks is quite a while, right?
Well, you guys had to verse yourself because he himself is also from the rock and roll / metal world too, right?
He was in the beginning. Yeah, he was in the early 90s and stuff. He used to play for Sadistic Humor, and he's a fantastic guitar player as well. But he got into doing the Lex Plexus and, you know, his other stuff, Sean Lusu, his solo project and stuff like that. He's just a multi-faced, you know, kind of creative force. He's got like his electronic stuff. It's all over the place, you know. And actually it's funny because I had heard his album Stellar Trip, and I told him, I was like, man, I heard your CD and I played it. If you like, it's because I was starting to get into electronic, like I was mentioning, you know, like Eamon Tobin and like, you know, it was this thing, The Prodigy, and there's a lot of electronic that was also on that iPod, or that iPod. So I was getting into all this other new stuff, and it was fresh for me because, you know, at the time I was like, I don't know how I can really get back into music or play music and go back to the scene and be sober, or just like, you know, it was just a totally new, I was spending a lot more time by myself than being influenced by any other outside creative force. That's kind of what brought this whole thing around, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. So it was a way to express yourself without having to necessarily, because like having a band, you need to jam with the band. Writing around the band requires communication, and sometimes, let's face it, not everybody is the greatest at those facets of everything. So it allowed you to
very true
do that, especially when you're going through a recovery, being able to get out those emotions and being able to release them right away, as opposed to having to have that wait time, is definitely beneficial, I would find.
Yeah, well, that's what, like, going back to what I was saying about being kind of the lone wolf a little bit with the creative, vision, and like being able to be like, I've got this in my head, this is the kind of the way it sounds. You know, obviously when you do anything creatively, like if you let your brain take over too much, you know, you're not going to really get the purest form of creative force from yourself, you know, because your brain has my brain has a reputation within my life of just fucking everything up. You know, it's like, no, you're not sleeping tonight. You're going to think about this all night. And it's not even going to do you any good. You know, like my brain it won't shut off a lot of the time. I find that there's a really fine line between me like tapping into a super deep creative force sort of part of my life, and then me just being a brainiac, manic, crazy fuck, you know, like, but then if I could find that fine line between like half awake and half asleep, you know what I mean? That's when I find that my creative stuff flows, where there's no holds barred and it just comes out. And when I listen to it later on, when I have a straight head, I'm like, whoa, what the fuck was I thinking? I don't even know where this came from. It just came from somewhere else. And that to me is like the true creative nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Where you sort of get in like this lucid dream flow where it's like you're not actually dreaming.
You're not in
like
control.
Your mind is just like going though, and it's exploring entirely different realms and like ways to express different visions that like you see, and like how can I word this within different ways to like, or do I want to veil it within a certain way? Do I want it to be up front? And it's really a beautiful way how like you go about creating it.
Well, your mind is like a computer, and your thoughts are, you know, your thoughts don't really exist and this is where I'm coming from. So this may not, you know, a lot of people may not see this the way I think I see this, and some people think I'm a little out of touch with reality. But what really is reality, you know, in my mind nowadays, I think that. But yeah, so basically, you know, my computer mind wants to think all these thoughts, and these thoughts don't really exist, and these thoughts are made up of whatever. And if I let these thoughts take hold, they can really manifest into my reality, you know. And so I find it's way better when my thoughts just shut the fuck up and let me carry on, and then I let like a creative driving force just take me wherever that wants to go, you know. And that's really all. That's how you really get to know who you are underneath all of this, right? Because all of, like, you know, a lot of all people know is what I show them, and they don't know really who I am or what I am or like where I'm from or where I'm coming from at all. All they see is what I show them, and that's all I can offer, you know, like in this world. And if I'm through my music and lyrics or through any kind of thing that I'm doing, they can take what they want from that, and even then whatever they take will probably not really be the message I'm trying to portray, and it'll just be a small fraction of what I'm really trying to let out. Yeah, it's a kind of a struggle for sure.
Well, everyone's free to their own interpretation for sure of the art mediums, and especially like the way that you express something and the way that helps you deal with something. Like, say, someone of a different background, of course, being someone of an underground, of an underdog, like the underdog story comes from so many different backgrounds and so many different things. Whereas like me and you, like, can say that like we're very different people, but I'm sure there's certain situations in our lives where like we could have ended up within certain rounds, and like even just talking to you, like we're very like-minded people at the end of the day,
Yeah.
no matter what. So it's like it's very different, because like everyone was also very worried about like the thought of originality, but if you allow the thought of originality to corrupt like the things that you're trying to express, then suddenly like the first original thought you had, whether it was original or not, no matter like how original things are, it's like it's already corrupted by the thought of, oh, is that original enough?
Yeah, you're always going to be you. And it's and when you're, especially if you're an artist, it's to be original. Nowadays, like there's so much out there. It's the same thing with misinformation or information or any of that stuff. There's such an overabundance of that stuff. And it's just, you know, everything is so oversaturated. Media is oversaturated. Everyone's got their own YouTube channel. Everyone's got their own digital platform and their blogs, and people can just say or judge, or all with the click of a button, they can do all these things. The only chance you even stand at all in a world of like this is to just try to just be yourself and let that happen without comparing yourself to other artists, or even really getting in the mix with the scene too much, because the scene has got so much stuff going on in it as well that can pull you away from your creative process, and that can distract you from, you know, and influence that in a way. And it can be good or it can be bad, but like a lot of the time I find that my best stuff comes out when I'm like, I hate to say, but, you know, kind of like in isolation, you know, and it's like, it can be a painful process or a joyful process where I'm like pacing back and forth. I'm either pacing back and forth in my apartment being like, you know, am I wasting time? Am I wasting time? I should be writing something. And then I sit down and I can't fucking squeeze a word out, you know, but then there's other times where I'm like, I put a beat on and I'm like, fuck, and I just grab it and I just write something and it just comes out, you know? So it's like a gamble, right? You really know there is no middle ground for me with that creative process. It's either one thing or another. It's up or it's down. And I'm still like, you know, I don't know anything about it really. It's just like my best bet is to just let who I am in my creative process be itself and flow freely. And that's the best way to get results.
And that also goes to the expression and who do you allow to see yourself, also goes back to the idea of genre, which ties into niche, which, like, let's say with the idea of social media, where like a lot of people feel like, oh, I got to make a page and my page has to be based on an entire niche. And it's just like, well, what's wrong with letting, like, if you're going to let people into your life, what's wrong with letting people into knowing exactly who you are? Why are you trying to create a special vision of who you are? Because, like, if this person was to meet you in real life, like, that entire, like, ideal and, like, vision that you've created can come crumbling down very quickly.
Well, you know, I think your best bet is to, like, just you know, not fake it, and just be like, here it is, here I am. Here's my songs, here's my pictures, here's my personal story. I mean, you know, like it's only lately I've been open to talking about my past and my personal, you know, experiences that have led me certain places and my addictions and stuff like that. You know, like I've been an addict for most of my life, you know, and like most of my life, and now finally just, you know, barely coming out of it, and still struggling with a lot of things. Like I'm open to talking about those things because I feel like that can inspire people to open up and talk about their things. And it's all about kind of like being able to also listen to other people talk about their things and share their stories and maybe express themselves through their songs or their artwork or whatever. And, you know, even like recently, I put up a series of photos on the internet that have, you know, it's just like, you know, there's a bit of skin, you know, it's not supposed to be pornography. Like some people think that it is, you know, there's always that, there's both sides of that
There's
coin.
an art to the body though, and especially like the body is a canvas.
It was mostly about vulnerability for me and acceptance of my own body and my own face, and kind of like embracing a fearlessness to it, right? And even with that whole process, like for me, that process lasted probably like a few days, and maybe still will come back, you know. But it's like I'm thinking constantly. I'm like, fuck, was that a good idea? You know, was that really what it was about? What were my intentions with that? But my intentions were that it was like I was sitting on those pictures for so long, and I was like embarrassed to put them out. Because I was like, oh, I don't like my face. You know, I don't like my face. I don't like my body. I don't like my fucking tattoos. I just don't like myself. It had everything to do with me hating myself, really. And then, you know, after putting the video for Father out, where I was just like that was a very vulnerable song and a very vulnerable sort of like approach to music I've never ever taken. It's a mellow, sort of slow, somber, haunting sort of sounding song with personal lyrics with multiple layers of meaning in it. And that to me was my most vulnerable piece of music. So I figured, you know, maybe I'm just like, you know, I looked at the pictures and I'm like, fuck it. And I just went, and I put them out in a series with captions above them, explaining kind of in an artistic, poetic sort of way, and best I could, describing like, you know, about reflection and vulnerability and my progression, and just like kind of an admittance to be like, I don't really exist. Like I've done all the drugs, I've done every fucking drug in the goddamn book, and now I'm sober looking at who I am, and there's really nobody there. You know what I mean? All that is there that exists is what I create.
It's whatever you decide to do, because like you are energy. However you decide to purpose that energy, right, is exactly what you do with it. And like other people can try and purpose your energy for you, but if you take control of your energy and you make it your own, that's beautiful.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
That's all you stand a chance at doing. And you know what? If the world likes it, then that's cool, and it doesn't really matter. But if the world doesn't like it, then it doesn't really fucking matter anyways, because all you are is a flicker of light in an infinite fucking time setting or whatever that is, you know. Like we really are all like the whole existence of the human race in the eyes of a universe that's been in galaxies and all this kind of stuff, and endless universes and stuff, is just, we're just a flicker, you know. And we have to be like here and enjoy that as much as we can. There's no sense in being scared or being afraid of just being open and letting ourselves get to know what it's like. It's interesting. We're in these human bodies, and most people don't question any of it. They're like, you know, it's the same thing with everyone drives a car, but most people don't know anything about cars. I mean, I'm not saying I know anything about cars, but I'm just saying that it's like we do all these things and we do them. We take everything for granted and we don't even understand why we're here. We're just on autopilot. You know,
a lot of it is instilled with us, and especially from like the terms of underdog or something else. Like for a lot of years in society, to step out, even 1,000 years ago, to step out, or even 100 years ago, is like someone who is unique or thinks in a different way that is outside.
Oh, you'd be crucified.
Exactly. Like you would be someone who would be taken out. So like we as human beings have like taken on this subconscious feeling that like if we step outside of what is considered normal, which like normal shifts like huge amounts almost every single day, even if we don't notice it, but it's like what is considered normal, if you step outside of it, the fear of just being like
different or just countercultural or any of that stuff. Well, I don't really, you know, normal is not really a word that I've been able to really make sense of. When I think that people are normal, or when I say I'm not normal, that doesn't make sense to me. To me, there's only conformity. And conformity is like the way things have been made and groomed to be. And somebody has thought of that through their willful action and intention in some other way. For example, like Aleister Crowley, his book Magic in Theory and Practice, he talks about, it's like the idea of magic, to put it in a very blunt way, was magic is an intentional act of will that causes change within conformity, and that's all it is. So, for example, if I have greater influence one day through my music on things, like say like the way that he even wrote that book. And writing that book, he affected a lot of different people in the way that they live their lives, in the way that they try to manifest their dreams or make their vision become a reality. And in doing that, writing that book and releasing that information to people, and breaking down the science of willpower into causing change within your life or in other people's lives, that was an act of magic in itself.
Yes.
So that's what I mean. It's like I feel like I don't really. There's nobody really in there that really exists. And this is where we get into like collective conscious, you know what I mean? Like I'm in this body, and this body is a vehicle for something that's in there that is creating things. And that's what defines me in this reality, or this simulation, if you will, like it's like that's how I feel about it. So the more like I'm constantly, consistently on my grind doing this music. And even like it's like, yeah, I'm doing hip hop. And in layman's terms, I'm doing hip hop. But hip hop is now, it's like really, it's just another extension of my artistic personality, or my artistic, or my creative side, right?
Yes.
So it has really nothing to really do with what genre it falls under. It's just another form of music. It's another extension of what's going on, creative reflection, right? And it just happens to be in a really diverse, exciting kind of new way.
It's all, once again, is how do you decide to use that energy? What is your intention with it? And like hip hop can be used, just like metal or punk, it can be used in so many different fashions, where in popular culture, yes, it's got like a lot of people just think, oh, it's all about going to the club and doing all this other stuff. The core of it too, like there's a lot of hip hop artists that also do make those songs, that also make really deep music that is about living in like heavy situations and everything else. And it's what do you decide to do with the energy within you once you're within that realm? Because like you can also be a carpenter. As a carpenter, like you can build so many different things. Are you going to build with concrete? Are you going to build a skyscraper? Are you just going to build a house? Are you going
They're
to
all
build a shack?
different mediums.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're all different mediums of, whatever. It's like, it's all different kinds of canvases, blank canvases. And, I think when, and there is rappers, there's like, I guess it's also part of rap culture, hip hop culture to be maybe not so much hip hop culture, but like rapper culture is, talk a lot about glorifying, having more, lots of money, having lots of, having chains around your neck, and drinking the finest booze like it's no big deal, or doing the drugs, or acting, like you own the world. And that's like this weird self-entitlement ego shit that's getting pumped. And I really don't think now is the time in the world where people need to be hearing that kind of bullshit, And like, people are going to do what they do, but I don't necessarily, like, I would not have an easy time writing like that. I would just feel like I'm not really doing anybody favors, And I think like that music is hugely popular, especially in the clubs and with most people. And that just kind of goes to show, where we're at as humans in the world right now, being influenced by this ego culture,
And what exactly is our goals as a culture and as a society? Because if that is exactly what we're promoting and what we're putting on our pedestal, what exactly are we trying to achieve with that? Like, where do we move forward from that?
Well, there really is no moving forward with it. That's just it. And that's why it's shallow. You know what I mean?
Incredibly.
It's incredibly shallow. Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the whole things is we've been desensitized and demoralized, and you know, now we're just, you know, no, especially with like I said, misinformation and information and oversaturation of all of those things, like makes it so that people don't even really know what they're doing. Or they don't know what is right or what is wrong or what's the truth and what is lies, you know?
Well, misinformation itself is incredibly crazy because like news outlets will go and push whatever it is that they think will bring in links. And it's especially like as a newscaster, like we're promoted to push like clickbait. Clickbait is the big thing because it brings in ad revenue, because the more people that see your website, the more ads that get driven. And it's like, and you see it with all of the like panic media that gets produced too. And it's it's crazy.
Well, I mean, that's where we're at right now, especially in the world. Like if you don't like one news outlet because you personally don't agree with it, then there's another one that's for you that says the same story but in a completely different way. And how are you supposed to know what's actually going on? Nobody knows what's going on. And like I said, like the last thing people need to be listening to is a bunch of shit telling them that, you know, just to be better than everyone and to rule over other people because that will serve you better. And it's just like this, it's kind of like this fucked up, you know, it's taking people away from the things that are valuable in life, actually, like, you know, like connection and relationships and like making, you know, doing good work with other people and trust for your fellow human, you know.
And especially like what kind of relationships do you build inside of those scenarios as well too, because they say like you're a reflection of the people you surround yourself with the most. So if like you're putting yourself in those environments, like what is that doing for you too? Like,
well, there's people out there that literally make fortunes off of making sure that they put themselves in certain positions to be around people that have money and you know, and those are the vultures, you know. You can't, if you have a lot of money or something, you know, you're going to have to watch everybody. If you like, all of this stuff is written in by some of the most legendary rappers because they know about these kinds of things, you know what I mean? Like Nas sung about that in one of his songs off It Was Written, talking about you should use your eyes, you know, because like, and you better watch them because they're waiting for you to turn your back at any second. And as soon as you look away for 1 second, they could just rob you blind or whatever, you know what I mean? Like all of it's kind of like laid out with that because those guys were living that life. You know, I don't live that life. I got barely anything. I have everything in lots of senses and I'm rich in a lot of senses, but I don't have any money, you know? I'm just like, but I'm blessed in the way that I've got like people that want to help me make the vision into reality and like, you know, I'm grateful for that. So I try to, you know, work with what I have and not use those kinds of influences within my music, telling people to do stupid things.
Well, let's get into some of those influences inside of Daz Tha Punk's music right away here. Before we do that, I think we should go ahead and spin another song off of Daz's 6-song EP for you guys, The Ambush here. But of course, before we do that, we have to take care of a little bit of business. You guys know we have to go ahead and shout out the main way you can support the podcast. Of course, that is ilovedtp.com, where you can go ahead and get yourself rocked out in the latest Desert Tiger gear and rep the show everywhere you go. Of course, today's show is also brought to you by these wonderful affiliates and sponsors. Are you a manic pro wrestling fan such as myself? Or maybe MMA is more your style, maybe boxing is your flavor. Well, let me tell you about your new favorite website, your new favorite app. It's all about Fight TV, and let me tell you why. That's because Fight TV is where you're going to find the highest quality pay-per-views and even the highest quality in free shows. They have free events in all of these categories as well. That's right. you can head on over there right now, download it in your app store, and get started with some of the hardest hitting action in the game with the biggest streaming library in combat sports. And if you're a fan of other sports too, let me tell you, Fight TV has you covered, as they're just starting to add things like soccer. They're expanding very quickly. They're hard hitting. That's right, Fight TV. Download it today. Today's episode is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering you guys, the listeners of Desert Tiger, The Ambush, they're offering you one free audio book with a 30-day trial subscription of their service. And Audible happens to have the largest library of audio programs available, including audio books for you to sink not only your teeth, but your ears into whatever it is that you're looking for. Audible most definitely has something that is going to fit your interests, especially if you love reading but maybe don't necessarily have the time to read all of the time. Well, you just head on over to www.audibletrial.com/Desert Tiger. That's right, audibletrial.com/Desert Tiger. One free audiobook with a 30-day trial subscription of Audible. Alright, it's about time that we go ahead and spin another track, and go ahead and trust me that this is fire.
Like static B, masterfully disastrous and dangerous like catastrophe. Inept psychology, illogically killing me, instilling in me hostility, and in a dichotomy, it becomes automatically part of me. It's hard to be intellectually and lyrically sharp as me, cause I'm a force to be reckoned with, so don't you even start with me. Respectively, OG punk from the heart of street, distorted riffs, the DBs rip like true artistry. Honesty, grip like creative force, destructively runs its course, remorselessly rips through doors like a Trojan horse. Abstract parallels subconsciously respond to me on astral planes, war glories, horror stories, and battle scenes. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire. Intercepted on higher waves, interlocking communications, open the floodgates. Blood waits for those in wake of this verbal assault indefinitely. This specimen be especially deadly when internally relearning what is known from past lives. Runs deeper than cuts thrown from fast knives, through blast that chastise, in flames from blackened eyes. Hedonistical at mythical proportions, killing aristocrats with lyrical distortions. Breeds majestic contortions of mass audio proportions, causing convulsions straight through your skull, son. Making your shit come undone, feeling tremors from your brain to your thumbs to your heels. I slap the shit out your cheap shit appeal. You don't have the balls to be it for real, so get fucked off or seal the deal, son. Bad to the core like Bronson. Get your gear laced, get your shit together, son, for the mass motherfucking devastation. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire, I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burning the liars, burning the liars. I'm walking the wire. My thoughts become twisted like a double shot of poison.
poison like I'm double-fisted. I tried to make the mark, except I missed it. I reject the limp-wristed who don't just want me to fall. They expect and insisted. They'd give me all the drugs and the booze I need to get pissed with. So the relationship between me and my heart becomes distant. Please help somebody, I need assistance. I'm trying to keep up a healthy resistance, but in every instance, I read about these fucked up incidents and I become choked. And way deep down inside, my hatred becomes provoked. Will I be the next one to get smoked? This shit is no joke, but I have to wonder sometimes. The more I see the rise in violent crimes and people getting shot over nickels and dimes in the alleyways with the scum and the slime, and the more that I read about it, my fear is refined and bent out of shape as I'm thinking about the killing and rape and the evil in the hearts of men as I stick my head in the lion's den. If I ever get out of this godforsaken place, I hope I never have to come back again. But until then, I have my pen, and the pen is mightier than the sword, and the price of ignorance is more than I can afford. And the names of the dead, they're too many to record, and I can see the scores written on the board. It reads 2-0, but that's what I get for being a hero. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burn out the liars, burn out the liars. I'm walking the wire. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burn out the liars, burn out the liars. I'm walking the wire. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burn out the liars, burn out the liars. I'm walking the wire. I got the fire, I got the fire, I got the fire, burn out the liars, burn out the liars. I'm walking the wire. I got the fire. Blast back, fucking up the fast track, cut corners and mad stabs, prefabs, underground meth labs, and three-headed hellhounds. My mind is flooded with more ghosts than Indian burial grounds, frowns and crooked smiles. These fucking clowns cooking crack the fire. Like terror spectrum disorder spreads over miles, devouring like necrophiles. Psychically, I'm a think tank, potently choking the enemy intensively. Lyrically, I'm spiritually automated, hated by many yet not sedated, never faded. You motherfuckers all walking around jaded.
The Desert Tiger Podcast.
All right, well, let's talk about what you're working on, and let's talk about some of the influences that you're going to be talking about going into the future. I've heard that you have 3 different EPs that you're hoping to release here in 2020. Each of them seem to have a different idea behind them. I've heard the titles of 2 of them, one of them being Surveillance, the other one is Songs for the Underdog Volume 1. Not sure about the third one, so let's take a dive into each 3 of those EPs, what their importance is, and all of that. Let's start off with Surveillance.
I'm good with this. Okay, Surveillance initially was supposed to be the first one that was going to, and maybe even only one that I had planned. And that one is done with a very dear friend of mine. His name is Leon Rossico. He does all my videos.
Okay.
And he's just, he's been a longtime friend for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And he's recorded a lot of my punk bands. He's seen me grow up from young teenager to where I'm at now. I'm still just as immature. But, it's a 4-track EP. It's a concept sort of EP, and it's called Surveillance because of the idea of surveillance capitalism and how all of that manipulation and all of those things tie into the war system that we live in and that we've created for ourselves as a society. So that's kind of what that's about. And it's got like all of these EPs are being created completely different through different processes. So this one, I am composing the songs and the beats with the help of Leon, and his, he's co-producing it with me and engineering the recording. He's got a really nice studio at his place, and we go there, and it's like we just kind of chip away at these songs. It's kind of similar to the way that Lex Plexus and I did it. Okay. Right? In the way that it's like it's all original stuff. There's no there's no kind of I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how anybody else really does it, but it's like we don't use any kind of sample packs or anything like that. We make everything ourselves, and then we like tweak every sound. And then once we add a new thing, we have to go back and tweak more little things about that sound so that they fit with the new sounds. And it kind of is like turns into this living piece of art, like I was saying before. Yeah, so that's 4 tracks, and there's probably only about 1 track left to go on that in the writing process.
Okay.
And it's more based on it's almost like Public Enemy crossed with 9 Inch Nails or Skinny Puppy or something like that, but in an early 80s kind of way. Huh. So it's got like a retro industrial sound to it. And it's got, there's a lot of heavy guitars incorporated into it. And now that's something that I was iffy about, because rap metal is something I don't want to be doing.
Yeah.
So, and coming from crust punk, there's a lot of elements of that in it as well. Like Discharge and like Doom and like, the whole idea of like everything being sort of politically based. That's, so it's almost like crust punk crossed with like, super low tuned heavy guitars with like there's lots of rock and roll bends and stuff like that in it, and all the lyrical concept is all political stuff, right? And based on war and based on revolution and based on like talking about like how everything's about to like go off and explode, because the tensions are so high in the world. And so there's that.
Okay. Yeah. Very true. Things can only continue to boil for so long before the pot goes over.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like you're getting pretty deep on that one.
Yeah, it's still in the works. Like, it's hard to really say really much more about that. That's coming out probably more closer to summer. And that'll be the second release of this year. And then the other release that is coming up, I scheduled it for May 1st.
All right.
And it's called Songs for the Underdog, Volume 1. Because my first single from the first EP was called One for the Underdog. I'm sure you've heard that. There's the video for that.
That was your first video,
That was my first song, first video that came out. And, so in that song, I touch base on, I write him for this and I write him for that. And, it's funny because, like, that song, for a lot of people, they've said, oh, yeah, this is really repetitive and stuff like that. And you're not really talking about the underdog. You're just kind of saying different kinds of underdogs. But then that song being the only song of that nature on the first release, there's no other songs about the underdog on the first release, really.
Yeah.
It's just that one. That's why it's like One for the Underdog, So I decided that writing a series of songs for the underdog based on different, and this is why I call it Volume 1 as well, is because I plan in the future to do a continuation of Songs for the Underdog Volume 2, because really, like you say, we're all underdogs in our own way, and everybody has this story underneath that has led them to where they are, and we've all gone through troubles and trials and tribulations of life, and some have it worse than others and whatnot, but everybody kind of has a story. So I try to have an unbiased creative standpoint in these songs where I'm not telling people what's right or what's wrong. I'm just merely reflecting as sort of a journalist on the realities of certain lives that people have lived, right? There's a song about, it's more personal stuff, like Father is on there. It has to do with your personal relationship with God, or your personal relationship with your father, or if you are a father, you can hear meaning within it as well, right? And it's kind of like a prayer. And then there's a song about intravenous drug use and the lifestyle that, it's basically a song about a syringe from a metaphorical standpoint, right? And then, talk like a lot about the different cycles of abuse within different walks of life and different classes and races and stuff like that, and how really the abuses of power is what causes a lot of these dynamics to happen and problems to occur in the world. So there's talk about that. There's talk of there's a song that covers the Highway of Tears, Highway 16, and missing murdered Indigenous women and men and things like that. And it's a really important topic.
Something that doesn't get nearly.
That's a really that topic to me is it's a hard one to research, because you're more documentaries you watch and the more interviews you watch with victims' families, and the more you read the massive list of reported missing names and things like that, the sadder it gets. But so that one's one track on that. That's still kind of in the works lyrically.
That's a tough topic to handle.
It's a really tough topic to handle. For me, it's really tough as well, because I have, I've got a daughter, and I think about all these people that have lost their children on that highway, And then just like, you know, I could talk about that for a while. I think that whole situation runs a lot deeper than most people like to admit.
Yeah.
But even then, who knows? Really, I don't know. You know, all I know is what I've researched, and I barely began to crack the surface of anything, you know. Anyways, that's that. And then there's another song on there. A couple other songs on there. They're still in the works. I don't want to really reveal all of it, you know, but it's basically a concept for all the underdogs that are out there. And it's not the last one I'll do with that.
Like you said, it's only volume 1.
Yeah, and you could have endless volumes of that, the way the world is, you know, and the kind of the amount of people that you see. And on the third EP was with a different guy who just recently contacted me and said that he was, you know, he's like, hey, I do beats, you know, you want to check it out? What do you want to do? And I didn't really get back to him quickly at first, because I have a lot of people that send me beats. And sometimes I'm like, I'm feeling this, and sometimes I'm not feeling this, or sometimes I have absolutely no time to open it and even listen to it and get anything from it, because the state of mind that I'm in is like go, 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 go. But I had to listen to some of this beats, and I was just like, you know, this is totally modern and totally different, and he's got all these beats, and he would like to work with me. So I started kind of writing. And the writing style that I got out of working with these particular sounds is totally out of my normal thing. Like, it's way more poetic based. I use a lot of broken language and sort of slang terms, and like it's based a lot about my personal addictions within my lifestyle as a drug addict and all of those things. Like, it talks a lot about drugs and alcohol, and talks a lot about just like you know, ego from an egotistical standpoint. Talks a lot about like manipulation of self, and talks a lot about like sex, and talks a lot about like just like those dark disassociative places that you can go when you're in those, when you're deep into drugs. And so that's kind of what that's about. And it's these songs are actually really janky sounding. Like, they've got this weird, crooked, like it's almost like a wind-up toy, you know, this like fucked up wind-up toy or something, shit like that, you know, where it's like really kind of like eerie and spooky. And they're all different kinds of styles of tracks, but they're mainly trap style hip-hop tracks. So that's like, you know, I'm hoping to have that around Halloween at the latest. And then that's my 3 EPs that I have planned. And I got a couple other video things going on as well during the summer. Yeah.
Nice. You recently actually just filmed a video at a local venue. I
did. It's not a local venue. It's actually my the boxing gym that I go to.
Okay.
The Kamloops Boxing Academy. Okay. Yeah. Ken Huber, he's my boxing coach. He's my mentor. He basically, you know, him and Pup from the Grotto, and with the help of some other people, they kind of like helped me put that whole thing together, allowed me to use the space to do that, because, you know, they support what I do and they believe in what I'm doing and they're excited about it. So, you know, it took a long time to set all of it up, and maybe I just work way too hard at things and I try to micromanage things because I don't want anything to go wrong. So, but I was on, you know, I made this list of people and this guest list of people, this massive guest list of people. It was catered. The food was unbelievable. 5 Bean Brew Bar did the coffee pots. Ryan Clark was, you know, he's the head chef at Hello Toast downtown. He's amazing. So they basically put this wicked video shoot together, and then Leon came down, and, you know, we had, you know, wicked lighting, and, you know, DJ Virtue came and was the DJ, and we did this song. This is a single. This is separate from all these other EPs. Okay. Yeah, it's just basically
standalone.
Yeah, it's just a standalone one, just for the video and an audio release or whatever, all one single. And yeah, it was pretty good, man. It was just kind of like, because the first video was just me. The second video was like about, you know, had the other guys behind the music on the first EP, which is, like I said, Lex Plexus and Brent the Butcher. Yeah. And those guys were in there. And then, you know, I kind of wanted to do a video that was, you know, a lot, like, I got a lot of support from the local community, and I wanted to have everybody in a video with me. And I'm like, that's the only thing I haven't really tried yet. So we had this song, and we did this track, and it was like, fuck, we listened to it, I laid the vocals into it, and it was like, fuck, this, you know, this would be a great video. And then Leon's like, this would be an awesome live video. And instantly started the ideas started coming out. Like, it was like, I'm going to call some people. And I just instantly had it lined up, and I was like, hey. And then like less than 2 months down the road, the boxing gym's filling up with everybody. And I'm looking at Leon, and I'm like, man, remember when we just like instantly said, you know, this would be like this, and now it's happening, and it's not even that far away from when we thought of the idea. Like that to me is like special, you know.
It's crazy how you can turn stuff around like that.
Yeah. Well, also I've been hanging around this town for years, and a lot of people do know me, and they've kind of, you know, especially some of these people that were involved in the video shoot have seen me go through my ups and downs, and then seen me go through this change process that I'm still in the, you know, barely at the middle of.
Yeah.
And so I think they support me, and they've got my back on that. So yeah, it turned out really great. And I don't know when that's quite going to be ready to come out, but hopefully soon.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So before we wrap up, before I ask you the last question of the day here, actually, there might be 2 more questions, but where can more of the listeners, the ambush, where can they find out more about Daz Tha Punk?
Well, I do have a Facebook page, musician page. Just search Daz Tha Punk. That's DazThaPunk, Daz Tha Punk. And I have an Instagram as well, which is also all one word, DazThaPunk, Daz Tha Punk. So you can check me out on there, and I've got links to, you know, you can also check out the music. It's on most digital download platforms. The first EP that's out already is on, you know, things like Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and all that kind of stuff, like any of those download sites. And I've got a YouTube channel as well, Daz Tha Punk YouTube channel, and there you'll find all my music videos.
All right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. So you happened to mention on the last little bit there, talking about the community and how they were giving back to you.
Well, I love them.
You recently have started to give back to the community through workshops, helping other youth with learning how to write their own, even though like you're pretty, like, as some people would say, like pretty new at this. You've already began to help new youth, maybe new underdogs, begin to hone their voice and help give them a method to hone their voice. So what has it been like to give back to the community?
Well, the first time I did that, a very dear friend of mine who is a teacher at Kamloops Senior Secondary. He's the social justice and English 11 teacher. His name's Don Wilson. He's a great guy, and he's seen me around for years playing in punk bands and metal bands. He's been to a bunch of my shows. He knows a few of my buddies around in the other bands, and he still comes out actually to some of the shows that are happening. He's the teacher up there, and he asked me, hey, would you be interested in teaching, you know, coming in and maybe talking about, you know, creative writing and stuff. And this is like a long time ago. This was like a year ago or something. I was like, oh, well, for sure, you know, and when do you want to do this? Let's do it. And he's like, oh, it won't be for a little while. Then we didn't talk to each other for a little while, and I bumped into him again at I think it was a Hemptress show at the Cami, and I was like, hey, are we still going to do this or what? Like, he's like, oh yeah, no, let's do this. And so we scheduled a day, and I was kind of nervous because I'm thinking like, oh, this, you know, what are these kids going to think of me? Mm-hmm. You know, are they going to think I'm just some old weirdo from downtown, or like, what are they going to think? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I look pretty crazy now. And, but I made some notes about just basically, you know, my creative process and how I do things. And I brought some of my new songs that are unreleased as well, you know, and I showed them examples of how I put things together. And that's another thing too, is all my music has lots of swearing in it. This, you know, fuck it. I like
natural.
Swearing. Yeah, it's natural. So, you know, I went up to the high school, and it was so strange. It was like all of a sudden there I was walking through a hallway with a backpack on, you know. It was just so fucking weird. It was like, whoa, I feel like this is so weird. Anyways, I went to the classroom, and by the time I'd got there, like, you know, it was exciting. There was a bunch of kids that were actually waiting for me, and they knew who I was. And, you know, this guy's come up to me, and he's like, dude, Daz Tha Punk, man, like Daz Tha Punk. And I was just like, what? The people know who I am in this high school. It's wicked. Like, So anyways, I stood up in front of the class and I did this thing, and I was a little bit nervous because I kind of was, had never done it before. And then that was just one of his classes, and then he had a different class that was the same. So, he teaches the same class, but it's in a different group of students. So I went back there a couple days later, and I did another one, but this time I was way more relaxed, and I had done more notes because I realized what I was missing on my first one. So I did, made some more notes, and I went in there super prepared, and this time I made them write their own bars, and then I took all their bars and tried to formulate it into a rhyme. It was really difficult at first because I was just like, having trouble kind of getting everything together, and I had to take everyone's thing and arrange it. They only did like 1 or 2 bars each. Anyhow, I did that, and then the third time I went back and I kind of recited a bunch of stuff, and then I freestyled for them, and sat around and talked to them a little bit. And now I have a new one that's coming up on April 2nd. I'm going on to Merritt, BC. I was invited to Merritt, BC, to the high school to talk to like 50 plus students.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. And, this time I'm actually going to talk about drugs and alcohol and lifestyle. And I'm going to talk about creative writing and creative processes. I'm going to talk about my experience with music in the past and percussion and being a drummer and being like touring. And then I'm going to talk about hip hop and try to, maybe I'll show them some of my music and stuff. But it's kind of, like, I'm also still kind of nervous because I'm like, but this has everything to do with me. It's like, am I, okay with doing this? Am I okay with myself, the way I sound talking?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I deserve to be heard by these people, or it can help them in any way? And so I'm really stoked about that. Yeah, it's really great. Like, they gave me these cards, so they all signed the card saying, "Thanks, Daz Tha Punk, for coming to our school." Like, I was like, fucking hey, man. It made me feel really good. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's sick.
Yeah,
that's
it was good.
That's super hype. And I mean, like, don't worry about, like, possibly not worrying if you should be up there, because there's that one kid who like is worried about his own looks, and he's in high school too, and like he sees you up there and you're that beaming light for him right there at that front of that gymnasium,
if there's
dude.
even one of those kids there, then I know that it's done good,
That's what it's all about.
because I was that one kid at one time.
Hell yeah.
And
It's all about the underdog.
yeah. Yeah, you gotta be for
Definitely.
the underdog, be one for the underdogs.
Sick. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining me here today. And
Thanks for coming
tell me
over.
all about the transition.
Hell yeah.
No worries.
Big
Thank
time.
you.
The songs that you heard today on the Desert Tiger podcast were One for the Underdog, followed by Fire. Both of these tracks come off of Daz Tha Punk's 6-song EP, which you can find it right now on your favorite music streaming service. And when you're doing so, because I know you're going to go ahead and do so, you might as well hit the follow button while you're there too, so that you can stay up to date when Daz drops those other 3 EPs. Of course, we spoke about them here today. You heard all about them, so you're going to want to know when they release so that you can get them in your hands, inside of your ears, as soon as possible. I want to thank Daz Tha Punk one last time with a roaring DTP thank you for not only joining me here on today's episode, but for reaching out to me so that we could set this up. I also want to go ahead and thank you guys, the listeners of the Desert Tiger podcast, for tuning in like the wonderful ambush that you guys are. If you're new to the show, maybe you want to go ahead and subscribe to Desert Tiger. Maybe you want to go ahead and review the show on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars would be fantastic. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode enough, maybe you want to share it on your social media. Go ahead and tag me, the Colton G, or Daz Tha Punk in those posts as well. Desert Tiger, tag that up too, so that we can show you love for showing us some love. Next week on the show, we are joined by professional wrestling legend Vance Nevada as we speak all about his career, which started out in Winnipeg in 1993 and is continuing now as Vance is working up to his 27-year anniversary as a professional, and we're going to be going through all of the details of his journey through those 27 years, and I'm extremely excited to get there with you. So until next time, Go ahead, find your mountain, climb to the top, no matter how many rocks fall out from underneath you and all of that good stuff, because that's adversity, baby. And adversity makes us stronger, so that when we get to that top of the mountain, our voice, our powers, they can be at their fullest, so that we can let them roar, we can let them shine from the top of our mountain, so that we can inspire others, not rule over them, because we don't do that here. We don't do that here. Exactly. And until next week, bye-bye.